Hello and welcome to episode 54 of PubShorts titled People Are People. Hi, people are people. Tony, how are you doing?
Hello, fellow people. I'm Tony O'Rourke. I'm VP. I'm very well. Sorry, I've got very well. Okay, thank you very much. Let me introduce myself. I'm Tony O'Rourke, and I'm VP for Partnerships here at Inago, and I look after our kind of the commercialization of our AI and human editing
Right, right.
products and services.
So now that you have introduced yourself, my name is Dr. KK. I'm a people as well, I suppose, and I am
Well,
the
yeah.
I'm the innovation officer at Trinka and Inago. And Tony, why are we calling this episode "People Are People"?
Um, so much of what we talk about in these podcasts is around research integrity, and trying to give the author, trying to give the publisher as much opportunity to be as clear as possible about who the contributors are, who the authors are in papers.
Right.
And people are people, which by the way is also a great song by Depeche Mode. Which so why not? So we're
Right.
talking about the importance of people in the scholarly publishing
Yes.
process.
Yes, we are leading off with that story itself. So I'm going to directly jump to that story, Tony. We are talking about people, the identifiers of people, and STM Association, as it always does, has created a digital identity framework. So, Tony, if you remember a few months ago in a previous episode of PubShots, we talked about a related document. They call it the new digital identity framework. They have published two parts for it. One is a broader research integrity. What are the different signals that one should have? And
Yeah,
now they are publishing the part two of the report, and that's what we are talking about, right? So this is part
yeah,
two. So let me read out some of my notes. So this is a new framework to tackle research integrity issues in public. That is the trusted identity in academic publishing.
yeah.
So the framework is designed to verify researcher identities and to combat fraud, which is a concern across publishers. And
Of course.
academic publishing, we know, is built on trust, and we have challenges such as the paper mills and dishonest actors exploiting systems. And this sort of a framework should help if everybody agrees and creates an participates in this maintain and building and maintenance of the framework. It would help us catch the bad actors, and the report is available for everyone to read. So I'll pause here and I'll ask you your thoughts.
I'm going to. I want to talk about this later on in
Right.
this episode, but this industry, the industry that we work in, is based almost purely on trust. You have to trust in the honesty of the research. You have to trust in the honesty of the researchers. You have to trust in the veracity of the research and the findings. And things like services like paper mills, which have popped up over the last few years. Can do so much to damage that trust and damage that integrity.
Right.
That again, I know I've always said this, but I applaud the STM organization for making the time and the effort to kind of highlight what the key points are and to create this sort of framework
Mm-hmm.
to help disambiguate and remove those uncertainties
Right, right.
in terms of authorship.
So let me now switch to the actual report itself. This is available for everybody to review and share feedback, and that's the reason why they are publishing this. And just quickly scrolling through it. So the whole point again is the to detect fraudulent submissions and the need for better verification. So if Tony, you are claiming to be an author, but you are not
Yeah.
quite an author, how do you detect it? So what are the things that you need to use? So there are obviously the things like how to understanding the problem, and what is a good actor, what is a bad actor, what are the objectives, what are the different types of trust levels. And it's a detailed document, and to be fair, it'll be boring for everybody to sort of have see me talk through it. What I'm going to ask you, Tony, so you are aware that our organization is trying to build a research integrity package, and it also
Yeah.
has author verification and disambiguation.
Yeah.
So, in your conversations with publishers in terms of technology to help them screen submissions, has this come up frequently?
Oh, this comes up all the time. This comes up before sort of AI became a part of every conversation in scholarly publishing. For years, uh, publishers have wanted to be able to absolutely 100% disambiguate the the author, the role of the author, who the author is. I mean, and it's not just from bad actors. Actually, I remember when I worked in physics publishing many years ago, we had an issue with a university in Korea. I think it was in South Korea. It wasn't an issue, but the challenge for us is that there were in one department there were like 9 or 10 people, not only with the first same surname, but they also had the same first initial. So they were, I can't remember, W Park or W Son or something, but they had the same name.
Yeah.
So anything that would help disambiguate those individuals, so we can be absolutely certain that when we're referencing a person, when we're showing how often this person is being cited,
Right.
that we're citing the right person.
Right. Right, that's an excellent point, and actually, this is exactly what we are trying to solve as well. But we are working on improving it and eventually presenting to all the publishers. But quickly, the framework consists of this identity framework consists of for the following steps: assessment, verification, evaluation, and action, and finally feedback. And the verification methods that they suggest include things like, for example, ORCID, Tony, and other identity providers, institutional
Yeah,
email
yeah,
confirmation, and payment card verification, all of it. And the key recommendations include verification during stages of the user journeys, because there could be several places where such things could happen. So it's a detailed document. I recommend, as we've always recommended, STM Association's documents and white papers, etc., are very, very rich and deep. It'll give you a deep knowledge regarding whatever topics that are concerning the academia
yeah.
publishing
And
industry.
as you rightly say, KK, we're developing research integrity tools that will, among other things, help the publisher then to disambiguate the
Right.
author.
Right. All right. So this is not the only research integrity things, the topics that we're talking about, or stories that we're talking about. We are moving on to the next one. Not quite a research integrity thing, but very interesting nevertheless. So this is a news article published in Nature last week. Catchy, clear, concise. Three-part phrases boost research paper citation. So basically, tripartite phrases in titles attract citations, Tony. So it's very interesting. Economics papers apparently gained 3.5 times the citation with tripartite titles, and medical and life sciences papers saw an average increase of 32 citations. And this is a study that analyzed approximately 235,000 economics and 93,000 medical papers.
Yeah.
Very interesting, and you would not have thought that this would happen. And I'm just
I,
looking for examples. But continue with your thoughts.
Oh no, I was going to say that I read this article and it kind of blew my mind. It's sort of as you know, part of our core business, we're a content services business. We help authors to prepare their content, whether it's using human
Right.
services or AI services, and very often we'll get papers that will receive submissions from authors that don't have a title, and they ask us for recommendations on titles or suggestions for titles, or the title will be so bad or so poor that we'll suggest an alternative.
Right.
And you track the history of a paper, what from the point that we receive it to the point it's actually published, and so often the title has changed so fundamentally, but somebody has taken the point to say, okay, well, this model works, this approach works.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's tripartite, bipartite, there are others. What the title is, it's the hook.
Yeah.
It's what drags you in. So if you're an author, if you're uncertain about what sort of title to give your paper, contact us. We can help you. Our editing services can help you to do that.
Right.
To create a catchy article title.
Right, and some of the examples I was searching for, it's envy, inequality, and fertility is one, and market size, trade, and productivity. These are, I guess, economics and I guess medicine as well titles. So very interesting. I mean, you mentioned the hook as a concept. I mean, that's exactly what music is also depending on. If you have a good hook, then you have a lot of airplay and a lot of downloads, and you become popular. And that's exactly what is happening in the context of a title as well, right, Tony?
Well, yeah, except but not wanting to contradict myself, and I don't have an actual example at hand. But some Nobel Prize winning researchers have published papers which have had deeply dull titles, or not dull, but sort of unimaginative or not particularly catchy titles. But they are important. They're factual. They're accurate. They express the science. So I don't know. anything that will help make the content more visible is a good thing in my mind. But I don't think the authors should get too bogged down in it, because they can work with organisations like us to help them if they're uncertain.
Right, right. And if I were to ask you in terms of the services that we provide, which are the services where such attention, extra attention is given in terms of ensuring that, like, components of a manuscript such as a title are taken care of and improved, and suggestions are given to the authors.
We have a number of different levels of editing service. We have perhaps our two most advanced services, one called substantive editing
Mm-hmm.
and one called top impact editing, will be of more help, because
Mm.
they won't just look at the title, but they look at the whole flow of the paper and the structure of the paper and make recommendations, which the author can choose to
Right.
accept or reject, of course. So yeah, there are a number of other higher level editing services that will certainly help to address this.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. So, moving on to the next one, which is again research integrity related, citation manipulation related article from Retraction Watch, one of our favorite sources. So, the title is "Why Do Nearly 45,000 Scholarly Papers Cite Themselves?" Uh,
Well,
s- this study by a couple of researchers found self citations in journals indexed by Web of Science since 1980, which is 45 years. I mean, that's my age, Tony. That's how old I am. Most self citations are due to database errors or referencing supplementary material. So there is some. It's not all gloomy. However, US, China, and UK authors are the top self citers, and some self citations might be attempts to boost citation counts, but it's not widespread. This type of self citation, and many citations in economics apparently are due to the tendencies of researchers to refer to or cite appendices. So which is a different thing that I've never thought of. I mean, you might need to cite other documents, and because it's the same document, it could be self considered as self cited. So any thoughts on this?
um, well, okay, from a practical point of view, we understand the importance of making sure that the references are a reflection, or reinforce and support the findings of a paper. And that's not just in terms of the sources of journals, the type of articles, but also how valid those references are. But you do see self citation patterns. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I remember when I worked in physics publishing. America, whether we want to admit it or not, US authors had a greater tendency to cite themselves than, let's say, the German author or the French author. Now, I don't know why that is,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think there was any kind of gamification that was going on, or any kind of manipulation of references. I think it was just these authors were referring to what they thought was important source material
Mm-hmm.
leading up to to validate the findings in this particular paper.
Right.
Um, so, so what we do within at Inago, we have tools that helps the publisher to check the quality of references, whether it's the age, the type of reference, is there a DOI, for example. There's also whether a reference has been cited, has been retracted, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we're developing, we haven't rolled this out yet, is the ability to track self citations as well. So
Right.
if there are rules, and some publishers do set rules, you can only cite yourself up to 5% of times, 10% of times. If there are rules that a publisher wants to set, then our intention, it's
Mm-hmm.
not available yet, but our intention is to allow the publisher to create that, to customize it in whatever way they see fit.
Nicely put, Tony. So I'm going to go to the next article, which is a news article from Nature, and this is again related to, I guess, citations and authorship. So related to research integrity. It is titled "Does Sharing First Authorship on a Paper Carry a Penalty?" What the research says. So, Tony, just a hypothetical question: if you and I were to publish a research paper based on the topics and conversations in PubShorts, and if I were to ask you, would you want to be a second author, or do you want to share first authorship? What would you say?
Um, oh, that's a good question. Um, yeah, I suppose if I was interested in my citation performance, and then how often my papers are being cited.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really depends on what that source is looking at. Whether if it's just citing the first author, then it's only going to be the first author that gets the benefit and not everybody else. Um, I, but ultimately, it's not just about the self; it's about the validity of the science. So if we were publishing a paper that moved the state of the knowledge forward,
Yeah.
I don't think I care. The thing that I think is more important is there's something which hasn't really come up very often. Is you see these very large multi-author
Mm-hmm.
um, papers that are published, which some papers can have like 200-300 authors cited or contributors cited.
Yeah.
What I'd like to see, and so I know some journals do this, so this isn't aimed at them, is more clarity and more transparency about the role of those authors.
Right.
Why is the first author the first author? Why is the why are all those individuals? What part have they played
Mm-hmm.
in the creation of that paper? And I don't think there's any particularly easy way of doing that. But I think transparency around that would then would help. Does first author mean lead researcher? Does first author mean contributing researcher? I've
Yeah.
received papers where the first author was a postgrad student who's sending a paper on behalf of their head of department, for
Right.
example.
Right. Right.
So clarity around the role of the authors, whether they're first, second, 10th, it doesn't really matter. I think is just as important.
Right. So I asked you a question. Your answer suggested that you would probably think about it, but what this research is saying that you don't need to think about it much. Even if you share first authorship, it is not affecting, or your reputation is not at stake. So I'll just quickly read out some of the points here. So this study dispels the myth that the order of names in the paper's author list dictates a perception of success. No reputational penalty was found for the shared first authorship, and
Oh, there
author
you go.
yeah
There you
author
go.
yeah the author order decided by is decided by chance, in the sense, so even like a coin toss or something like that, and which has challenging our perceptions, including what you said, what you gave as an answer. And this is obviously it's a research related, I mean this is an outcome of a research hypothetical, sort of a thought experiment, research experiment, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But
Here's a question though. What would you say is the difference between a first author and a corresponding author?
no, that's different. First author in this case would be, if there are the Harvard citations method. You generally, if you are citing a paper, you refer to the first name of the paper and then add
Right.
et al to it, right? So you will be
Yeah.
visible. Corresponding author is simply somebody who writes to the journal and communicates with the journal. It need not be the primary author, although it is oftentimes the primary author. It can be somewhere else in the authorship order as well. And the last point, Tony, you mentioned how do you determine who should be what, right? And for that, obviously, there are these authorship statements for which I think COPE, if I'm not mistaken, is a leader, or ICMJE
Yeah.
authorship guidelines are there. Also, there is a credit taxonomy, which is something that we can use to determine. And many, I think, if I'm not mistaken, many journals already ask this credit taxonomy to be provided at the time of submission. So
Yeah. They certainly do. I just think I'd like to see that
yeah,
more publicly sort of used in research paper in published papers.
right. Right, we are moving on to the STM Association news story, which is titled "MDPI in 2024: Research Integrity, Expanding Global Reach, and Strengthening Open Access." So MDPI has released his achievements report, which is great, and what the focus was on improving or tripling the research integrity team size, and
Yeah.
expanding the workforce by 750 and reaching approximately 6,650 staff. And MDPI has published 240,000, approximately 240,000 peer-reviewed open access articles, and over 25 million papers have been downloaded.
That was just in 2024.
Yes. So overall, they are taking giant sort of are very good advances in terms of improving their research integrity and open access, which is excellent in my opinion. And
Yeah.
you've had probably working relationships with many, and if I would like to congratulate on them. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think there's been some criticism waved at MDPI over the last few years. Some of it I think is unfounded and unfair, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big organization. Yes, it's grown quickly, but you just have to look at some of their journals. They've got some journals have got very high rejection rates. I mean, some of the journals with rejection rates of over up to 70%, I think, in some cases. But there's been some criticism waved at them around things like the number of papers that are in special issues, the speed of peer review. Sometimes there's been a couple of concerns expressed there,
Right.
but these are solid, in most cases, absolutely rock solid journals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what they're doing is just reinforcing that by improving their research integrity services and the number of people working in that space,
Right.
to give the author, to give the publishing community at large, the scientific community at large, even more confidence that what they're doing is bang on.
Right, right, right. And moving on to the last theme within research integrity, we have three related stories. The first one is an announcement regarding an AI model by Google's Gemini. So Google has introduced. So sorry, the title of the paper it's published in or the article published in Ars Technica is Farewell Photoshop. Google's new AI lets you edit images by asking by by in terms of text as well as voice. So Google has introduced the new AI model called Gemini 2.0 Flash, which allows users to edit images through text prompts. And actually, as of this week, ChatGPT is also rolling out the same sort of a thing. In terms, they are moving away from, if I'm not mistaken, DAL E and integrating their image generation features within ChatGPT. But I think we'll talk about it in another episode. So this new model, Gemini 2.0 Flash, allows image editing via simple text commands, making photo manipulation accessible, which is worrisome. Can remove watermarks and add or remove objects, which we have seen in phones if you have been keeping up, Tony. And it can also change the perspectives of images, which basically it's pretty much like changed. It's not even a real photo anymore. That's the problem with digital
Yeah.
photography. It also can integrate text and image processing into one AI model. That's what we just discussed. So what are the problems? Because we are worried about quality of the images because it might still look like a fake, but we are more worried about the potential misuse in
Yeah.
terms of creating deep fakes and other misleading media. So I'll pause here. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Well, there's two things, isn't there? There's image manipulation and image manipulation detection. We provide services that will help the publisher to identify any manipulated images within a given research paper.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take a industry standard tool and we'll provide a human overlay to check and verify the whether an image has been manipulated or not, and give a risk score back to the publisher.
Right.
But this is something else. This is actually, almost image creation.
Right.
And I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to identify and to spot.
Yes. Yes.
When these images come up. So and there's going to be a lot of work around this in terms of and rules set around this. But the question is, if you're using an AI to create an image to which represents your work,
Mm-hmm.
is that wrong, or is that just using a tool like Photoshop or anything, or Adobe, some kind of Adobe artwork tool,
Mm-hmm.
to generate the image?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So generating an image is not quite a problem, but you'll have to obviously state it. But if suppose you're generating an image instead of providing the actual image, that is a problem. And also you have when you there should be watermarks. We are talking about AI watermarks even in text, etc. The problem with this model, which is captured in this story, is that it makes this new model makes stealing pictures easier than ever by removing watermarks. So let's say you have a watermarked image, a copyrighted image of yourself. So whatever it might be, Gemini simply removes it because it is allowing the user to do it. So that is a concern more than anything else. Even though Google has stated apparently that it's not anticipated this issue, but they are likely to address this in future updates. So which is a good news. But anyway, this is a key point here. It's very, very nice that more models are there for people to use to create for their artistic creative purposes. But when they start to use the same functionalities for manipulation and let's say fraudulent activities, especially in the context of research, that is not a good thing, and that's what we are talking about.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from a personal experience, I shared a video with my son this week. It was some music video.
Yeah.
And I said, "This is incredible. How did they do this?" And my son pointed out, "Dad, you do realize an AI was used to do this. There was actually something embedded in the content. I had no idea looking at it that it was AI generated.
Right.
It looked so real.
Right, and Tony, just to nicely wrap up the image-related manipulation thing, we have the trusted scholarly kitchen, and the article that we are talking about is tackling. It's titled "Tackling Science's Nasty Photoshop Problem." So, if it's just a quick overview, and I'll let you speak about it a little more. Image manipulation is a significant concern in scientific research, and this is what we've been talking about. And there have been several cases which have shown, because of image manipulation, we have had detrimental, consequences in terms of the published papers, as well as the people who are publishing, and journals and publishers, etc. So it eventually leads to wastage of resources, because you have to go back and forth, as well as repair whatever has been damaged in terms of the
Yeah.
trust. So publishers are implementing stricter guidelines on image handling, and that's what you just mentioned, and we are offering services for the same. And there are technological advancements both sides in terms of manipulating or changing images, which we just talked about, Gemini Flash, also for detecting images. But the most important thing, the Scholarly Kitchen article is stating that there needs to be collaboration among the different stakeholders in the industry, so that this can be, let's say, handled appropriately, so that we can decrease, at least if not prevent completely, more instances of, let's say, image manipulation. Any thoughts on this, Tony?
Um, we've
Uh,
talked about this so much. No,
mhm.
the tools are there, but the people creating the software that allows you to increasingly able to hide what you've changed are also there. And I think any industry-wide initiative
Okay.
that can stamp out, or at least make it easier to identify
Mhm.
these solutions has got to be it's got to be seen as a positive thing. And as I say, we have services which will help
Yeah.
detect manipulation
Right.
in an image, give an extra layer of security if a publisher needs that.
Right, Tony. If somebody were to be interested in knowing more about the service, where can they find about this service that we offer for image
Yeah, if you
manipulation
go,
detection?
if you just search image manipulation detection in Argo, and it will give you a link to the services that we offer to help
Right.
to help identify any manipulation.
Right. Right. Tony, before I take the couple of quick hits, I want to just we've talked about so many different research integrity issues. I mean, we started with author identification. We talked about citation manipulation, but now we are talking about image manipulation and detection. We have contextualized it through the Scholarly Kitchen article. So my question to you is this: there are so many types of research integrity, and there are different publishers that are struggling with handling research integrity issues. So, what, why is it important that publishers need to collaborate, and what are organizations like us doing to help publishers to solve some of these research integrity type issues?
Well, I think it goes without saying that publishers working together. There are so many good examples of publishers working together for the greater good. I mean, look at Crossref, for example. Crossref started 25 years ago as an initiative to provide a single point of reference to obtain identifiers for scholarly content, and that was, I can remember, it was 81 publishers that came together at the time to create this initiative. I think, and further initiatives are necessary, cross-publisher initiatives, in order to identify, bad actors in this game. You ask why is there so much emphasis on research integrity?
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mind is filled with so many things, but this is academic publishing is all about trust in the author, trust in the research institution that's supporting that author, trust in the funding agency that's funding this research, that trust in the veracity of the research, that the researcher is representing his or her research accurately, honestly, openly in their paper. And if that trust disappears, if that trust disintegrates, you've got a fundamental, almost an existential problem that you have
Mm-hmm.
to address. So it's so important that publishers have their research integrity methods in place, and that's why organisations like MDPI, which already had very good, for example, research integrity processes in place, further invest in those services in order to be sure
Mm-hmm.
that they're giving the authors, the editors, the board their editorial board members, the readers, that level of trust that what is being published is a true reflection of honest research that's taken place. And then we provide services that will support publishers to identify any of those research integrity issues.
Right, right. So could you explain what are the types of services that we offer in terms of research integrity? Both, maybe you can even think of screening manuscripts to maybe detecting issues or assisting in terms of editorial review and peer review.
Yeah, so we have as you know, KK, we have a business which specializes in AI supported tools,
Mm-hmm.
products that will sit in different parts of the workflow for a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a tool that will screen for language quality, for example. We have a tool that will screen the contents of the manuscript, not just for quality of the language, but also things like running technical checks. Does it have all its compliance statements, ethical statements in place? For example, if you're doing if it's a medical paper, have you got a clinical trial number, for example,
Right.
cited? To ensure that references are well, first of all, that references exist.
Right.
If an author is listing a reference, is it a made-up reference or is it a real reference? We have tools that will then identify whether that exists, whether it's a live, valid reference, whether it's a retracted reference, as I mentioned earlier on. So there's a whole range of tools, and just to screen content to make it as easy as possible for the publisher, for the content creator, to be able to highlight potential issues with that manuscript or that piece of content, and give the author the opportunity to address that if any issues are then found, which could be completely honest and
Right.
Things that haven't happened on purpose to try and falsify the research, or just
Right.
slip through the net somehow.
Right. So we should also probably not forget to mention that we offer human services in terms of, for example, peer review support for journals
Absolutely,
as well,
yeah.
which is also, so maybe you can also explain a little regarding that, what kind of services that we offer.
Oh, no, I mean, yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I don't want this to be an Inago advert, but one of the services that we do offer is if a publisher requires help in finding an additional reviewer, then we have a peer review service there. So an author can come to a publisher can come to us and say, look, help us to find a second or a third reviewer for a paper that's already been given one positive review, but we need 2 or 3 review reports, and we're struggling to get that second or third review report. So can you help?
Right. So thank you so much, Tony, for the detailed answers. We have a couple of quick hits remaining. I'm going to shift to a screen share and talking about a very interesting article. It is titled, Is ChatGPT a Drug? Metaphors show what students think of AI. So in a nutshell, a bunch of students, especially from the UK, if I'm not mistaken, postgraduate students were asked to describe or to use metaphors for describing how they use AI. And some of the metaphors, first of all, it's a diverse view. AI was thought of as a drug, a bridge, or a guide, especially in terms of learning, etc. And they fall into 4 categories: technical support, text development, transformation hazards. And the overarching sort of theme of this, let's say, article or research is that we need better terminology or metaphors to sort of understand how AI has impacted. So I'll await your thoughts on this. I thought it was very interesting.
Again, it's like the earlier paper we discussed about the tripartite titles. Why? What does it mean to the student in metaphors? What the reality is.
Right.
Publishers are increasingly able to identify the use of Gen AI in content that's been submitted. So if an author, for legitimate reasons, might use a Gen AI to help them create a piece of content, they need to be open and they need to be transparent and disclose what they've used and where they've used it when they're submitting a paper.
Right.
Because if they don't, the publisher can very easily find out and identify that, increasingly find out what's happening, and that paper could be rejected. And it could be a perfectly good paper where the author just needs to be more open in terms of and transparent in terms of how it's been used.
Yeah, and this image infographic is a quick summary of what the students think of as the different conceptual categories of AI use. So technical support, text development, transformative potential, and threat. So you can see sort of the spread. Text development is the biggest one, followed by transformative potential and technical support. Whereas in terms of threat, they do not identify it as much. Maybe that's because they are students. We do not know that. But moving on to the last one,
Well,
can.
no, so what I thought was interesting about that paper also, KK,
Hmm,
it wasn't just postgraduate students in the UK, it was international postgrad students in the UK.
okay.
So saying, look, apart from just learning your subject,
Yeah.
you've got another problem.
Right.
Can I just say to you, if you're an international student and
Yeah.
you've got a problem with a piece of paper, with a paper, or you need to address that, then think about using services like Inargo's
Mhm.
to help you to get that paper in the right condition before you submit it. Because very often you've got one chance to make this work.
Right, right. And finally, Tony, the last story, quick hit. This is well, it's a blog. Its title: Can Open AI do creative writing? The answer is yes and no. So basically, this discusses the latest Open AI model, which is designed for creative writing, and the writing community has mixed feelings about AI generated creative works, which would be naturally expected. Some people find the AI's creative output to be impressive, whereas others call it unimaginative. And critics argue that AI cannot truly create art; it's more of a mimicry. So now, with this, I mean, every piece of art, I would argue, is a mimicry because somebody else has thought of it or has been inspired by it. So it's not a big thing, but it is also important in this context to realize that how we can use AI and how guardrails for AI use and the right setup. Even when you create an AI application, you have to be ensuring data security as well as you're using the right it's a guardrails in terms of not letting data spill out, and it's always within ethical uses of AI. Tony, your thoughts?
Oh, well, kind of a side thought, really. I was discussing this topic with my wife only this week. About it's becoming increasingly difficult to spot when something's legitimate
Yeah.
content or fake content. But is that necessarily a good or a bad thing? And she made a very good point. And say, yes, as you say, it's mimicry. Um, knowledge, art is a reflection of what's gone on before it.
Yeah.
But what makes I think the human so unique is that ability to sort of think, to go outside of the box,
Right.
not to think within parameters, but to think outside of those parameters. Some of the world's greatest inventions have happened
Right.
not because they've worked within the box, because some intelligent scientist,
Mm-hmm.
some intelligent has looked at an application and thought outside the box. Oh my God, this is the complete opposite of what we expected it to happen, and yet I can see a real world use, which I don't think an AI would necessarily be able to do very easily unless it
Mm-hmm.
was specifically trained to do so. A good example of that is the post-it note. The post-it note that was developed by a scientist in the 1930s, whenever it was. I can't remember. No, the 1960s. Sorry, because he wanted to invent the world's strongest adhesive, and what he invented was the world's weakest adhesive. But one of his colleagues spotted, actually, this is a really good way of
Right.
creating post bookmarks in my page. I think if you asked an AI to think of the potential applications
Mm-hmm.
for that, I wonder whether
Right.
you'd get the same result.
Right. So that brings us to our the end of our episode 54, titled "People Are People." Tony, before I leave you, I have to ask: you are traveling to the US for the ACRL conference next week.
Yeah.
So just what are you looking forward to, and what are the things that are discussed in ACRL conferences?
Well, the ACRL conference, ACRL, I think, is the American Association for College and Research Libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a library meeting. So it's librarians at research schools across the US and across the world. It's an international meeting, and we'll be there to talk about the use of our AI tools, particularly Trinker, AI language writing and editing tool within the academic workflow, and how it can be used to support researchers who are creating content.
Mm-hmm.
And increasingly, libraries are getting more involved in providing these kind of not just content services, but actually content development services
Right.
for their research communities.
Right. And
So that's why I'll be there. And if you're going to be there, if you're attending the meeting, and you're in the US at the moment, and you're planning to go to the ACRL meeting next week, which is in Minneapolis, we'd love to see you.
Excellent, Tony. And I believe you will be sharing updates as and when you get through the conference.
You can't stop me.
So how can people find out what you're up to at the ACR in Minneapolis? Maybe visiting a favorite, I don't know, jazz bar or something like that.
Oh, I won't have time to do any socialising, so Keiko. It's all work.
uh,
It's all work, of course. So I hope to be able to visit Paisley Park, the Prince recording studio venue, establishment while I'm there, but I doubt I'll have the time.
right, right. So where can they find more about such updates that you might or might not share?
Okay, so you can contact either of us, I think, indeed, on LinkedIn. We'll find me on LinkedIn. We regularly post us on LinkedIn. Or if you want to contact me directly, you can contact me at tonio@anago.com.
Excellent.
And indeed, if you want to, I'm just going to say also this is episode 54 of PubShorts, by the way.
Yeah.
So, as you said at the start of this episode, and if you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to see all previous episodes, just visit our YouTube channel,
Yeah.
where we have the previous 53 episodes uploaded. This will be uploaded soon as well.
Yeah.
And share your thoughts and comments. Press the like button and let us know what you think, and give us some ideas for future topics.
And thanks to those who have already written to us across the different social media platforms. We are very grateful for your, listenership, whatever the fact that they are spending time to listen and watch us, and we don't take this for granted. And thank you once again. And this brings us to the end of the episode. 54 people are people. Go listen to Depeche Mode if you haven't already. It's a wonderful song. And until the next time, on behalf of Tony as well as the team that helps us bring such content to you, this is Dr. KK signing off. We will see you in the next one. Bye bye. Bye, Tony.
See you next time.